Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another Axel 72 video. And today it's a pleasure to be joined by Sara Haghighat-Joo. Hope I pronounced that right. How are we?
I'm good. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. And of course, for anybody, this side of the pond, I'm from the England myself. And for anybody who may not know, am I right in saying you're a 29-year-old light flyweight who's 4-0?
Yes, that's correct.
Amazing. And of course, like I say, a pleasure to speak to you today. And you're fresh off your world title win. But I want to, if that's okay with you, go back to the very start and start with a question which I quite often like to start off with being, why did you start boxing?
So I was in sports all my life and I did a lot of like team sports growing up, a lot of just like school sports, team sports. And in my grade 11 year, our coach changed over for basketball and I was big into it. Like I had been playing since I was 8 years of age. And she turned to me and said, this year I'm going to bench you and I'm not going to play you much. And I was like, absolutely not. Like I went home, cried my eyes out, and I was like, I can't do that. I can't just sit a whole year just on the bench watching everyone else play. So my parents were suggested I try boxing because my brother at the time was doing a bunch of martial arts, and they just said like, why don't you try going with him, go to the gym? And I did, and 6 months into boxing, I had my first fight and fell absolutely in love with it and carried on since.
No, that's a great story, and to hear your parents be so supportive of you in the sport. Quite often you hear parents maybe a little bit reluctant to get their child into combat sports, but how nice is it to have their support?
Oh yeah, my dad was a national team wrestler for Iran. So, martial arts was in our family. And like I said, my brother had been doing a bunch since he was 4 or 5 years of age. So they are all about combat sport and fully supported me in it.
Mhm. That's amazing. And when you look back upon your amateur career, like you say, it was not long until you had your first fight. Do you remember what happened in your first fight?
Yeah, I was entered into a tournament right off the bat. It was the British Columbia Golden Gloves, big tournament. I entered in as a youth because I was 16 years of age. And back then it was point system. So I had won 40-12. And the fight should have been stopped when there's that much of a difference. Usually in points, if there's 20 or more, they stop the fight. And then so I won that. The next day, my coach entered me into a senior division. So I was 16 fighting a 24-year-old, and I won that as well. So I was like, okay, clearly I'm good at this.
Indeed. And I mean, you had, from what I've seen, an amazing amateur background. And when you look back upon it, what would you say are your kind of key highlights from that time?
Definitely that start of just like, sometimes you're discouraged when you start fighting and you lose. So right off the bat, I was winning a bunch, and then winning my first Canadian national title, that was huge for me. And I went on to, being a five-time Canadian national champion, and then went to Ireland and I won the nationals there twice. I got Best Boxer award, and the national team ones were definitely the highlight.
Mm. And I suppose as a whole, are you just proud to have represented Canada? And are you proud to, now in the professional game, kind of be representing Canada as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been brought up here my whole life. I've lived in Canada, so it's just it's cool to be able to represent your own home country.
Mm. Totally. And when you moved into the professional games, I suppose, was there, I suppose maybe when you look back upon it, has it helped having such a big amateur background to then progress you to then be ready to go into the pros?
Yeah, definitely. Like right now, I'm still doing amateur boxing as well. I'm trying to qualify for the Olympics while doing the pros as well. And I find that every time I go to either amateur tournaments or any sort of sparring camps, it helps the professional game so much because of just the skill, the technique. Pro boxing, a lot of the girls that you fight are just raw, come forward, just brawlers. They don't use the ring as much. They don't use their angles as much. So I find that amateur boxing just keeps like grounding that technique into me, just like drills that into me.
Mhm. Yeah, indeed. And am I right in saying you'll be the only current active world champion go into the Olympics?
No, actually, Beatriz Ferreira, she is a Brazilian 60 kilo female boxer who has currently qualified for the Olympics and is a professional. She just won the IBF world title. So there are a good few of us. There's a bunch of French girls, same thing. They're both professional and amateur boxing as well. As for world champions, it would be Beatriz, who's qualified right now and world champion. So
No, I completely
yeah.
slipped my mind, but yeah, of course. But I suppose for yourself and you knowing as much as you do about the amateurs, when there's been talks around boxing being taken out of the Olympics, how much do you feel like that could harm the sport?
I think it's for females especially, it only came in as of 2012, so less than 20 years later we're taking it out. Like it's only been in the Olympics for 14 years. It's a shame. I hope it doesn't happen. I know that there's a lot of politics, a lot of corruption, and that's probably why they've threatened to take it out of the Olympics. But I hope that this doesn't happen. Just like with wrestling, how that sport has been around forever. There was talk about it becoming no longer Olympic sport. That didn't happen, right? I hope the same thing happens with boxing where it's just all talk.
Mm, indeed. And when you're also, amateur and pro at the same time, were you going into the pros eager to prove to people that you didn't just have an amateur style and that you could operate amazingly out in the pro game as well?
Yeah, definitely. My coach has, from the beginning, I think, embedded that pro style in me. In the amateurs, I always have a slow start. Almost 99% of the time, I'm losing that first round because I'm taking my time too much, and then round two and three, I have to play catch up. So I always knew that pro was way more suited to me. And after my debut of 8 rounds, like I knew, okay, like this is for me.
Mm. And have you been, I mean, so far, I mean, of course, you're unbeaten, but do you feel like you have been comfortable with every step up that you have and it's come out at the right time?
Yeah, I think every fight that we've had so far has been exactly how we planned for it, how we trained for it, and my coach has just, yeah, just really tactically found the right opponents. And I feel like even the next one, I'm hoping to fight in November again. It's again going to be another huge step up, and I'm ready for it.
Mhm. Brilliant. And have you, I suppose, really had chance to reflect upon how big of an achievement becoming a world champion is? I'm sure you've had a lot of things going on since you've became a world champion, but have you really had time to sit and reflect upon it yet?
No, not really. I've like I got back into the gym almost immediately. I didn't have any injuries that I needed to take much rest, and I have another amateur tournament coming up, so it hasn't really sunk in. Right now I'm still waiting on my belt to arrive, so I feel like once that comes again, it'll be like, okay, you accomplished something pretty big, but right now it's just like go 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 on to the next.
And I suppose if you are to speak about that fight, how pleased were you with your performance from that?
I mean, going into it, I had a couple injuries where it was more like a vision thing where I was a bit nervous. I would say I was at only 40 to 50% of my efforts. So having done that and won unanimously, I'm pretty happy about it. But if I was to do that again and I was a little bit more healthy, I feel like it would have just been absolute, like just pure domination.
Mhm. And it shows how much of a, I suppose, a talent you are to be able to do that. And I suppose when you speak about nerves, have you ever really suffered with them much? Or if so, how have you been able to deal with them?
Yeah, so this last one, knowing that, your vision's not great going into this fight, I was quite nervous a week out. And normally it's like the nerves kick in, 2 days out, 1 day out. This was a full like 7 days, and I'm panicking a little bit, like, how am I gonna get through this? I'm not gonna postpone the fight no matter what. I've been training through it. I'm gonna get through it. But for me, it's more a case of just yeah, keeping my mind distracted, taking my dogs for a walk, or watching a show or diving into read a book that I'll get lost in, just constantly like distracting myself to not overthink and not obsess over the fight so much because the work's been done. Once you get in the ring, that muscle to mind connection will do its thing. Like for me, it's just keep your mind distracted with anything but boxing. Yeah.
Certainly, and I suppose, being the home fighter in that last world title fight, of course, it came, of course, with pressure, but do you feel like you kind of thrive under that pressure?
Yeah, definitely. The louder the crowd, the bigger the crowd, I do better. Even in sparring, when there's a full gym watching, I do much better than when there's no crowd. So, I definitely like that kind of pressure because I perform.
Mm. And when you said in a previous answer that you didn't really have too much time between going back into the gym after your last fight, how important is it to make sure that you don't burn yourself out on accident? And I suppose what is motivating you?
So I've been there where I've burnt myself out, and that's just comes with overtraining. So just being smart, it's quality, not quantity. So it doesn't matter necessarily if you spend 4 or 5 hours in the gym. It's more about quality, spend 1 hour where it's quality. So my coach does a really good job of just holding us back. And, even today I wanted to do more rounds on the bag and he's like, nope, you're done, takes my gloves off. So I have that support and the right coach to tell me when it's time to rest.
That's amazing to hear that you've got that support around you, which every fighter needs to have. And I suppose for anybody who perhaps may have not watched you fight before, what would you say makes yourself interesting as a fighter?
I'm very technical. So I like to box very clean. At times it does get rough, of course. But as much as possible, think that people really notice, like, okay, like she's a technical boxer. And then when I want to, on my terms, I can also bring the fight on and, stand in trade. Um, but I try not to do that, especially in pro boxing, because it's not worth it. You don't need the injuries, and why not just use your skill? Anyone can just stand in the middle and trade, but I choose to box when I can.
And going from the amateurs being traditionally a bit less of a physical type sport to that of the pros, was it a little bit of a surprise when you got in there and perhaps it was a bit more physical?
Absolutely, yeah. So my debut after the first round, I came back to the corner and my coach was like, "So, what did you think?" And I was like, "Well, now I understand what you mean by hand placement because in the amateurs, we wear headgear, it's puffier gloves, all like the top of the head shots you don't feel, but in the pros, when this itty bitty 8 ounce glove is hitting me on the top of my head, it makes a huge difference and your equilibrium's off. So, it was a big shock, and it just makes me way more focused knowing the dangers.
Mm, totally. And I suppose for future aspirations, like we've kind of touched upon the amateur ones, but the pro ones, you're a world champion already. And where would you possibly like to see yourself pro wise in, say, 5 years' time?
Oh, 5 years time. I don't know if I'll be boxing by then. I mean, I'm 29 years of age. I'd like to have a family eventually. So I give myself 3 more years where I'm undisputed by then. So November, I hope to be fighting for another world title, whether that's WBC, hopefully, or the IBF WBO. There's two girls we're looking at. By March of next year, I want to be undisputed, right? And then just keep either going to another weight division, winning there as well, be a multiple time world champion in a couple different weight classes. But I hope to be undisputed by mid next year.
It's what I want to be hearing. And I suppose when you look at the women's divisions at the moment, there's huge fights being made, and the biggest one at the moment probably Serrano Taylor too. You know,
Yeah.
it's a huge fight. And what have you been making of the developments of women's boxing?
It's coming along like and it's becoming more known. Especially with obviously Serrano and Katie Taylor fights. The smaller weight classes are slowly coming up, but I mean, I personally would never get in the ring with either of those two girls. They're a bit too big for me. But I hope that we continue to make noise. We continue to get these big fights on the main cards, and anyone I speak to are always say, like, female boxing is so much fun because there is more technical ability in it versus the men.
Indeed. And when you see Serrano go in and campaigning for 3 minute rounds, what's your opinions on these 3 minute rounds?
I personally wouldn't be interested in that only because we don't get paid enough. So I'm not going to take extra damage over not it's all a business. At the end of the day, it's about the payday. And if I'm not getting paid, then I'm not doing 3-minute rounds. And for her vouching wanting to do these threes and saying, it's more of a chance for us to get knockouts. Since she's done the 3-minute rounds, I don't think she stopped anyone. So I don't think it's really got to do with that at all.
No, I have to agree, and I appreciate your time, Sarah. I'm going to leave with this final question. Always like to ask anybody that comes on here, basically just open up the floor. Is there anything you want to shout out, promote, anything like that?
Always my main sponsors being West End Athletic Club. If you guys are watching or if you guys haven't been to this gym, come check it out. I teach classes, I do personal training, come say hi. Yeah, great community. I'm in Etobicoke, so anytime you guys want, I'll be there. My belt's coming in this week, so anyone who wants to come take a picture, come say hi, I'll be there.
Amazing, Sarah. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. I wish you the best of luck with your next fight, and possibly after that, we could come back and have another catch up if you'd be up for it.
For sure. Thank you so much. Thank you for reaching out.
Yes, and so if you're new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like the video if you did indeed like the video, and thanks.